Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
We made this.
Welcome back to We Are Starfleet, your Star Trek Discovery, but not for much longer. We're actually going to be expanding the scope of our mission to include Strange New Worlds coverage coming up when that premieres in May. I believe it's May. Is that right, Craig? Craig's our guest today.
Aye, yes, it's May the 5th, maybe, something like that.
Fantastic.
Day after Star Wars Day.
Great. Yeah, good timing. And maybe that's why Kenobi isn't premiering until May 25th, because they didn't want it to conflict with the new Star Trek show. I know that's not true. I know it's for a different reason, but that's what I like
40 years or 45 years since.
Exactly.
Yeah,
yes.
Since
yes.
The New Hope came out. Yeah.
Well, as you guys heard, my guest this week is Craig McKenzie. He's sitting in the chair I usually occupy. I'm taking over for our regular host Mike Slamer as he is currently having the time of his life on the Star Trek cruise. We're all very jealous and envious of him and his lovely wife as they have an amazing time with the cast and crew of this show.
Yeah, we just hate Mike for having fun.
And the show we are talking about this week is, of course, Star Trek Discovery. We are talking about Season 4, Episode 11, Rosetta, written by Terry Hughes Burton and directed by Jeff Bird and Jen McGowan. My guest this week, as I mentioned, is Craig McKenzie. Craig, what did you think of this week's episode?
Hello. Yeah, I did like it. I do have an issue with how slowly the overall plot is progressing. It feels very glacial, and it's at odds with the urgency that we're constantly told exists. We only have 29 hours till the DMA hits Earth, but let's go pounce around on this uninhabited planet for a bit, because we don't have anything better to do, I suppose. But it is instrumental in getting them what they need to progress, I suppose. But it just feels like they're not in a hurry to do anything, and that's at odds with the fact that they're supposed to be in a hurry. But I liked it. I think they came up with some interesting suggestions on how they can communicate with 10C, and we'll get more into it. But yeah, it had some good character stuff. It front-loaded characters that aren't Burnham for a change, which I thought was refreshing. So it was a good episode. It really popped in a lot of ways for me.
Craig, correct me if I'm wrong. You gave this episode like a 7.5 out of 10, something in that ballpark, if I'm right. Okay, yeah. I'd say I'm in pretty much the same place. I think I'm maybe a little bit more positive on it than you, although I probably wouldn't give it a higher score per se, if that makes sense. I definitely see what you're saying in your concern that this, certainly the story of the season overall, if they are planning to tell a story that's going to be self-contained in this season, it's hard to imagine the only 2 remaining episodes not feeling a little bit rushed, given the sort of weight that they've given this species, this mystery, all season. So I'm open to the possibility that maybe they don't resolve this 10C thread completely this season, and they do carry on this story in some sense into next season. That could be interesting, but so far the way Discovery has told its stories, they do tend to be self-contained within a single season. So assuming that they keep along with that trend, I agree, it's hard not to feel like this is all progressing at a fairly relaxed pace, and that might mean that the next 2 episodes are going to feel a little too rushed, maybe.
Yeah, assuming there are 2 there's conflicting information on how many episodes this season has.
Oh, really? Okay. I don't think I was as aware of that. I know in seasons past they have not hewn as close to that strict kind of
Don't have a
13 episode
connection
a
yet.
season
No?
format. They've done 15 episodes, they've done 14 episodes. I hadn't heard that there was some confusion about how long this season was, but I could definitely see this being something they stretch out over 3 more episodes at least. I don't know exactly how many episodes, or I guess we don't know exactly how many episodes there are going to be in this season. I had been operating under the assumption that it was going to be 13, but I could definitely see, with what seems to be a substantial remaining amount of ground to cover, them extending it another episode or even two, even though I don't think have been given any indication that that's what the plan is.
No, I think it is probably 13 because when we were trying to track it down, we were, as a group, trying to track it down how many episodes there was, and I think it was on the Writers Guild of America website they listed the work that people were doing for 13 episodes, so I'm going to guess 2 more after this one.
Yeah, that's been like I said, that's been my assumption as well, and I am curious to see what they're going to do in these 2 remaining episodes. It does seem like while we did learn a little bit more, and I thought what we learned this week was pretty tantalizing, pretty cool. It's a lot of the kind of sci-fi that I really dig, so there was a lot for me to like about this individual episode, but I do share some of your concerns about the kind of pacing of the season overall. It actually reminds me a little bit of what I was worried about in the coverage of the Book of Boba Fett that I did for The Way, our Star Wars podcast on the network. And in that show, it was this sense of them really not having any idea how to pace out the season as a whole. And so certain things felt like they were taking way too much screen time, and other things felt like they were taking way too little screen time. And there was a palpable sense of poor pacing.
I haven't seen all of Book of Boba Fett yet. I've seen, I think it's 3 episodes. It doesn't grab me enough to want to go back and watch it. So I haven't even seen all the stuff that people talk about, the Boba-less episodes and all the other things they bring in. So, yeah.
Yeah, which I know you weren't the biggest fan of The Mandalorian, so everyone who did like The Mandalorian really likes those 2 episodes. But I don't think they'll necessarily do anything for you. You might surprise yourself. I thought some of the stuff they did was pretty cool, pretty exciting, but it was not really progressing the story that we at least thought we were being told when that show started. And so, yeah, in the last episode of that series, we're left with this feeling of all these narrative threads are trying to be wrapped up in this rushed way, and you can't help feeling like, well, maybe if we spent the last 2 episodes on this story and these characters, it wouldn't feel like we were in such a rush to wrap things up.
Yeah, this is different in the sense that everything is focused on a specific plot, but they're just doing it very slowly.
It does feel like there are things that maybe in retrospect they could have done differently in the pacing of this season to get to this point a little bit faster, a little bit sooner.
Definitely, yeah. I think, for example, you could have cut the casino episode, because I don't feel like you get an awful lot of plot movement or character movement from that episode itself. I also think it brings Book and Burnham together a bit too quickly after he runs away, because it's basically the next episode and she tracks him down. So to get a bit of a sense of the chase, they could have been apart for much longer, and then all that you really accomplish from that episode is getting a hold of the stuff that you need to build the bomb. So I'm happy with Book just knowing a guy. That's fine. That's all you really need to know.
Sure, or it felt like maybe that is an example of a story that could have taken up less of an entire episode, maybe been the first half of an episode that led into some other part of this overarching chase that they've been on. It's also an artifact of, it's possible that we wouldn't be expressing these concerns if they did just do slightly longer seasons and give some of these stories and these characters a little bit more time to breathe. I'll be honest, I know I'm not saying anything new here, but I do miss the so-called filler episodes, or, filler episodes probably is too ungenerous a term, but the episodes of these other Star Trek series that had much longer seasons that I know we're not ever going to go back to, but nevertheless, these episodes where you didn't mind if we were just kind of hanging out on a little caper with these characters, because whatever. It wasn't as serialized. It wasn't at, the stakes of this overarching story didn't feel like they were overshadowing the smaller stories that they wanted to tell at times. Like even when you did have a highly serialized show like Deep Space Nine in the Dominion arc, you had these standalone episodes where they would just kind of take a break from all the depressing war stuff that was going on. And that was fine. You had the leeway in those season orders to have those kinds of episodes. But when you have what should be such a tightly plotted, self-contained, serialized story within 13 episodes, it feels like you can't really waste time. Waste time is probably, again, too ungenerous, because I did feel like there was a lot of good stuff in that episode. But again, when you're trying to tell a story in a set number of episodes, you have to be mindful about how the pacing of that is going for the audience.
Yeah, and I would broadly say that this season has been less serialized than other ones. Even though you have had the ongoing threat of the DMA, you haven't had strict focus on it entirely, where it's been used as a catalyst to tell a different kind of story where you have background elements thrown in. It's a bit like the weapon plot in Enterprise, actually, from season 3, where they just kept bringing it up every now and again, but they were off doing random stuff. And the catalyst for them off doing random stuff is, this might give us a clue to who the Xindi are. And then, oh no, turns out it didn't. Moving on. It's a bit like that with this, where they're sort of chasing clues or evacuating a prison planet or prison asteroid that is in the DMA's path, stuff like that. So it's not until the last few episodes that it's been strictly focused on the DMA. Otherwise, it's just been this, here's this thing that's out there, and that's what's enabling these plots that we're playing with. The Quat Malat one, for example, that is an indirect result of the DMA with the whole dilithium sharing and whatever.
Right. Yeah, there is a sense that, maybe some of these episodes feel like they belong in a show where there's a little bit more episodic storytelling, and where you have 20 plus episodes to have a few of these standalone episodes that don't necessarily move the overall plot forward. But it does feel like then we have some episodes where we have to move a whole lot of plot forward really, really quickly.
Yeah,
and maybe we feel
there's an imbalance in the pacing.
Yeah,
and
I feel like
at this point.
Yeah, and I feel like it generally really shows in the last few episodes of the season. And I particularly found season 3's finale to be pretty underwhelming. It might have been my least favorite episode of the entire season last year, and that sucks. It sucks to have that feeling at the very end of the season, and it feels like an unforced error. If that is in fact. And again, look, we haven't seen, at least I haven't seen the next 2 episodes, so I have no idea if they're going to drop the ball or what they're going to do. I hope they do something really cool. I hope they defy my expectations, but it is hard not to feel worried that they will have too much to do in too little time.
Yeah, it is a concern, because they have to introduce 10C, figure out some way to communicate with them and deal with the DMA plot. And what I think will happen is, on the back of this, I haven't seen the next episode yet either, but on the back of this, they'll use the hydrocarbons to form the basis of the communication, which is clearly what this episode is getting at. So, and then you've got Tarka and Book in the background. They're probably going to screw it up in some way. So they might be starting to get through to 10C, and then Tarka will do something that pushes their relations back and creates more issues, because otherwise, why are they there? They are there to be the spanner in the works, aren't they? They don't. Otherwise, they have no purpose, really. But yeah, I'll be interested to see how they go about the communication with 10C. I've got a couple of theories on how it could work, and it does riff heavily on previous sci-fi things that I've seen. So they could go the arrival route, where it's about how do we communicate with them, what do things mean, what is our baseline here, how do we establish that, and they come up with some way of, I don't know, some way of finding mutual understanding, whether that be with some universal concept. So they seem to be using emotion as a universal concept here, which makes sense given the emotional nature of the show. So I would guess that they'll find some understanding through the fact that they have the same feelings, and they can form a basis of communication based on the fact that we all feel joy, we all feel sadness, we all feel whatever these hydrocarbons represent. Or there's Or there's the contact route, which is they'll display a hologram of someone familiar to Burnham or whoever, her dad or Spock or someone like that. It will be that to dumb down their way of communicating for our benefit. So I think those are your two options there. Possibly they'll do both because the hydrocarbons exist and they haven't been introduced for nothing, and then maybe once they figure out how to talk in rudimentary ways, they'll do the here's a hologram of your dad or someone close to you.
I'd be more surprised to see them go the contact route, although I could see that sort of thing happening, some sort of avatar representation of the alien creatures that have progressed past the point of, our minds, to comprehend. I'm thinking of like these Lovecraftian horrors that these creatures might be, and our puny humanoid brains would just break at trying to reckon with them, and maybe they communicate in a way that is a little bit more, like a little bit more on our scale. But yeah, I hear what you're saying with them latching on to the idea of communicating through emotions and emotional states and connecting on that level. I think that really is fitting with themes that Discovery explores regularly. I liked that they tied in this cool sci-fi concept that is also one that fits in with the overall kind of feelings forward nature of Discovery, and I'm compelled by the idea that they can establish common ground with these impossible to understand and comprehend creatures at that basic emotional level of, we know for a fact that you are kind, knows what it is to experience fear and loss and also hope and love. And so knowing that we too, as members of the Federation, experience.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Experience those things as well. Hopefully making that connection with the 10C species is what it takes to get them to stop doing what they're doing. But of course, I agree that I think the presence of Book and Tarka is to kind of throw a spanner in the works and have the otherwise nice, normal diplomatic proceedings somehow go awry.
Yeah, it just makes sense that that's where it's probably heading. Obviously, it's just rampant speculation on my part, but I'd be surprised if something like that doesn't happen.
One of the challenges that I had with this episode was at a certain point early on, when Book and Tarka were plotting, talking about what they were going to do, I was thinking to myself, like, what? Why are you guys still doing this? Like, I guess I get it. You don't want to take the chance that diplomacy is going to fail. So I guess you're gonna sneak in there and then try to just find the power source and steal it or destroy it or something. And how does that connect with what Tarka wants to do to find his friend? I at this point I'm a little unclear on exactly what is motivating them as a clear, solid goal. I hear that they want to they don't believe that the diplomatic approach is one that is feasible or is going to achieve the goals that they need to achieve in enough time. But I needed to get a clearer idea of what's really driving them at this point, of what their mission is and why it's still that. And I didn't really feel like I got that out of this episode. I don't know how you felt about that, but that was my kind of overall feeling on the Book Tarka caper.
I wonder if certainly Tarka has lost sight of what he's doing this for anymore, because he's just been so consumed by his obsession with tracking this thing down and using it. Obviously, he wants to use it to power his interdimensional transporter, which is something I'm a bit confused about. There was nothing. They used to hop between universes in Deep Space Nine quite easily, without any mention of the fact that it needed obscene power requirements in order to do so. Well, I suppose they've established that the mirror universe and our universe are on a quantum level very close, so I suppose it's a bit easier. Maybe this other universe he wants to go to is on a quantum level much further away, so it takes much more energy.
It could also be
through.
related to, we had some indication from, oh my god, I'm blanking on his name, David Cronenberg's character.
Kovic.
Thank you. From Kovic that, it's been hundreds of years since there's been a crossing. Maybe crossing the boundaries between universes has gotten more difficult with time for some reason.
Yeah.
Or some, or maybe it's a kind of thing that fluctuates, or maybe it's like a wave function, and when the waves get really close together, there's a crossing possibility, and then maybe there's long periods of time where the waves are farther apart and you can't cross, or not without a massive amount of energy. Maybe Deep Space Nine took place during an era where crossing was relatively easy. I'm sure there are ways that they could explain it in universe, but they definitely haven't yet. But what's Tarka's plan? You're gonna break into, you're gonna sneak into this like extraordinarily advanced civilization, and you're gonna steal the power so you can use it. You're gonna destroy it so they can't. What are you gonna do? And how on earth do you think you're gonna actually get away with it? Like, it's just at this point it just feels too muddy to me.
Yeah, well, Tarka doesn't care what damage the DMA does. That's pretty clear. He doesn't care. He's just using it as a means to an end to further his own goal, which is using that power source in order to hop to this other universe where his friend may or may not be. We don't know. He doesn't know. And also, even if his friend is there, it's an entire universe. How are you going to even start to look? Are you just going to fly in a general direction and send out hailing signal, send out signals to see if he'll respond?
Right.
What is your plan after that? But that's the thing about obsession, isn't it? Once you get so far into it, you stop thinking logically about what you're supposed to do next. So his eyes are tunnel vision. He's on very much on the I need this power source.
And Book is
Book is more altruistic because he wants to stop people dying.
Yeah. No, I think I get Book's motivation much more clearly at this point. But I still don't know why. Now that they've gotten to this point, like, I guess Book makes his case to the leader of Earth, which I liked, and I liked that her response was like, "Hey, I know that I was in favor of destroying it, but now that we're here, our mission is still going to be diplomacy first. But hey, I'm okay with your plan as a plan B." I liked that she wasn't just a turncoat. Or something like that. I like that there was a little bit more nuance to her response to Book's entreaty, and really Book stuff. I do think I am a little bit more clear on. To your point, it's I guess Tarka's like, I wish that at this point, now that we've been introduced to his true motivation, I wish they were maybe making that a little bit more explicit. Like he can refer to this person by name now that Book knows who it is. He should be talking about. It should be clearer to the audience that he is being motivated by extreme, personal loss and trauma. And I get that that's kind of the background of his character. I feel like they need to be bringing that a little bit more forward and making, if he is losing sight of the mission, if he is too obsessed, I need that to be a little bit more clear. He's this guy who's incredibly intelligent and seems hyper rational and like he could think these things through, and yet me, dummy, sitting on the couch is watching the screen and thinking to myself, like, this doesn't make sense. You need to make it make sense to me.
He should be challenged on it, definitely. Book should be that person that says to him, okay, you get control of this device, then what?
Right.
And
like what makes you think you can even get close to it? You don't know anything about what's inside that hive. What makes you think you can even breathe inside there? Like maybe it's an entirely gaseous atmosphere because they are a species that lived on a gas giant, and maybe this entire field contains like some sort of weird fluid atmosphere or gaseous atmosphere, something that you can't even comprehend because this species is so far advanced. Like, what on earth makes you think you can just pull off a basic heist?
Or maybe our ship will dissolve the second we enter the hyperfield, because that's what happened when we went inside the subspace anomaly thing a few episodes ago.
Exactly right. Exactly right. He's proceeding with so much more confidence than is warranted given the information that he has. And I get, we've established how arrogant he is. So, like, I get they're maybe trying to lean on that particular personality trait to carry us through, motivation-wise, into why he thinks that he can pull this off. It's getting to be a little bit too much water to carry for the audience.
And I'm inferring a lot about it from just how he's behaving and things like that, but the fact that nobody on the show is challenging him, the only presence there at the moment, now we've got Reno, there's an opportunity for that, I suppose, but Book should be challenging him, because it's very clear he is still thinking rationally to some degree, because when he talks to Ndoye, it's, no, I agree with your pragmatic approach. This is a break glass in case of emergency type plan. I'm not actually planning to destroy anything.
Right.
It's only if we have to. And so he's still thinking along those lines. And I'm wondering if he's getting the sense that running off half-cocked with Tarka was a mistake, which it clearly was, because destroying the DMA did nothing.
Right. No, they definitely...
All it did was accelerate the destruction.
Yeah. By this point, he basically is only going along with Tarka because he feels like he doesn't really have any other option. Like, this is the plan. It's just, I don't even understand what the plan is at this point, or why they think that they'd be able to pull this off.
Yeah, he's made his bed and now he has to lie in it, and that's where Book is at this point.
Yeah, and I get that. So what did you think about what we learned about 10C as a species? I know that, leaving aside the potential pacing issues of where this episode sits in the overall season, this kind of sci-fi, the sci-fi of like weird, giant, huge, ancient, dead creatures who, had some sort of cataclysm befall them and were trying to decipher the clues of what happened, like, that is 100% up my alley as a sci-fi fan. So I really liked all this exploration on the planet. I could have done a double episode of them just hanging out on the planet if it weren't for the fact that in the back of my mind I'm thinking, like you said, oh man, you only have like 12 hours until Earth gets wrecked.
Yeah, I find it interesting because I'm always interested in when we see weird alien stuff, which we don't normally do in Star Trek. It's normally some, weird ears or a forehead
humanoid,
change
right.
or whatever.
Yeah. This is something truly alien in Star Trek, which I like.
Yeah, the only example I can really think of, other than in the original series, you had the giant space amoeba and things like that, or the living nebula in Voyager. In Enterprise, there was the episode, I think it was called Vox Sola in season 1, where there was that weird goo alien that was capturing people. It was essentially a web type thing, and it kept capturing members of the crew, and Hoshi had to figure out a different way to communicate with them.
Yeah, and Tholians are weird.
Yeah, Tholians are different as well, although they seem to communicate just fine because they just translate their speech into, it sounds like text-to-speech English.
Right.
Basically, that's what they do, so that's fine in itself. But it's very rare in Star Trek that you get something that weird with that kind of language barrier. So I'm fascinated by that, and it's finding the skeletal remains. It's, oh my god, these things are huge. And then you get the little flashes of them when they're having visions. If you freeze frame it, you get a kind of look at what they look like, and they're giant kaiju-like creatures, which is, again, brand new. And it's something that they can definitely pull off in this era of expensive, almost photoreal visual effects, whereas you might not have got away with it in the 90s, it would have looked stupid, or in the 60s, or whenever they were making Star Trek before, it would have looked stupid.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
The visuals just weren't there.
Definitely. I think that's something that I hope that, and maybe on a show like Strange New Worlds, we'll get some of this too, leaning into the bizarre, the strange, the extraordinary that you can now visualize because of the technology at your hands that was just way beyond anything they could pull off in the 60s and 90s.
Yeah, and sometimes in previous Star Trek stuff, you hear characters refer to weirder aliens that they've met in the past, but you never see them because there's no way to visualize them. And you've got Zero in Prodigy, who's, well, humans can't even look at her,
right?
Or them because they'll go mad if they do. And that was in the original series as well, and it was characterized by a light in a box and things like that. So you have to use your imagination to fill in the gaps. But now we don't have to use our imagination because the visual effects have reached a point where it is now possible to show us exactly these kinds of things. So if you want 100-foot kaiju-like beings that swim around in the atmosphere of gas giants, we can now make that for you.
Yeah, we've had some exploration in animated series of these kinds of species and settings that felt really impossible to visualize in a live-action context. But now that we've got all this incredible technology at our disposal, for TV and film production, they can really bring to life these crazy concepts for aliens that maybe they've just never been able to bring off the page.
Yeah, I suppose the crystalline entities may be the biggest alien that we've seen.
Crystalline entity is a good weird alien, and I liked that I liked what they did with the sort of, it's a weird word to use, but the humanizing of the crystal entity and making it clear that this was sort of not a simple good and evil type situation. There was more nuance there. It was always something that Star Trek, especially Next Gen, did well.
Yeah, they used sound pulses to communicate with that or something like that. It was about resonating. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that there is something analogous here where we greet these creatures that have been an incredible destructive force in the universe, but we're just not necessarily aware that what they were doing as a part of their normal course of events was something that affects other sentient creatures. Now, it's maybe a little bit harder to argue that with the 10C species than it was with the crystalline entity because, well, as soon as we got rid of a DMA, another one popped up in its place and kept chugging along. So who knows? Maybe that's an automated process. Maybe there's not a recognition necessarily on the other end of that process that this was the result of sentient creatures fighting back. But maybe they are aware. That's a mystery that remains to be answered.
Yeah, well, they finally bring up the point that I think they should have brought up as soon as they determined that the DMA was created by something. Maybe, and when they figured it out, it was created by a species that are way, way more advanced than us, advanced to the point that we can't even comprehend how advanced they are, which is going to be interesting to visualize when they get around to it. But the idea of, what if they just don't care about what they're doing? That's a problem. And I can't believe that hasn't been brought up before now. I can't believe it never occurred to Saru or anyone before this point, because it surely is on the forefront of someone's mind, or everybody's mind at that point. Maybe they just don't care. Remember back in, well, now, when we were chewing through the rainforests, not caring about how many species that we were wiping out completely, or how many habitats we were destroying, or anything like that. Any sort of rape of the natural world without any care, without any regard for the consequences of that action, both on an environmental level and on a
moral level,
preserving life level, everything. So that's what this analog is. And if the DMA just completely, or the 10C, are they just completely concerned with getting what they want and they don't care whether they're sentient life? Because they should surely be able to detect the fact that they're sentient life in the same way that we can detect, yes, monkeys live in these trees that we're cutting down, or bugs live in the soil that we're dredging up, or whatever. We know this, but we still do it.
That's true. That's true. And I wonder if that's something that they're going to try to reckon with through 10C, is this human analog, like the Star Trek likes to do, making it clear that a lot of power and a lot of indifference are very different, are a very dangerous combination.
Yeah, because it just has me wondering.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses, so don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
All the time since they brought this up, it's, yeah, they must be aware that they're launching this stuff into inhabited places. And I do wonder why it took them this long. Maybe they've been dredging other galaxies before this point, although they live just outside our one.
Yeah, like again, there are questions raised by this mystery and by this season that I find really compelling and interesting. I hope the show actually provides some satisfying answers or grows the mystery in unexpected and different and interesting ways that can be expanded on in the next season. You know, I'm open to all of that. What I think no fan wants is to be left feeling like we just got kind of presented an answer and then here we go, that was the answer and this is how we wrapped up this story and we're moving on, because there are a lot of questions that I have because of the way that Tennessee has acted that I'd really like to see answered or addressed. And my concern is that those things will kind of take a back burner to, well, we got to get through this plot.
Yeah, the ethos of Star Trek is very much there's nothing we can't resolve non-violently.
Right.
So that's the whole point. We talk about these things, we deal with it rationally and with diplomacy. There's give and take, whatever. But why not take that step further? And we've come up with something that we can't deal with. We can't resolve it diplomatically, and they're so far beyond us. Again, it's the metaphor of the animal that you're destroying their home. That animal can't talk to you and say, don't do that please, because you're not able to communicate with it. But at the same time, us having that awareness of the fact that we're doing that doesn't stop us.
True. Although I think the analogy would be, would we act differently? Would we respond differently if one of the creatures whose habitat we were destroying, invented a very strong explosive device, strapped it to our mining equipment and blew it up? Like, would we say, maybe these aren't in fact unthinking, unfeeling creatures whose habitat we're destroying? Maybe there's something else going on here. Like, I don't know. That's why there's a part of me that hopes that this was sort of an automated process, one where there wasn't a conscious being at the other end of this awesome power deciding to wipe out with indifference, whatever sentient species was in their way. I'm hoping that it was more along the lines of the DMA blinked off and someone flipped the switch back on and just didn't think anything more of it because they didn't know any better.
Yeah, like my dropped internet connection. I'll turn it off and on again and see if that works.
Right. Yeah. Maybe the Tennessee's cat hit the power cord.
Yeah, or it could be seen as if a bear were to attack people mining stuff or whatever. You would treat that in the way that, well, that's an inconvenience that we need to deal with.
Yeah. You wouldn't necessarily be investigating further.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's there's too much there, and I think there's too much to cover in a couple episodes. And if they do just go down the route of, we spoke to the 10C, they didn't realise what they were doing, they apologised and turned it off. If that ends up being the ending, I think that'll be disappointing, because there's just so much out there that they could feed into this thing. And yeah, it makes the 10C the analogue of humans in the 22nd century, where the 21st century is the one we're in, not the 22nd. I'm 100 years out of date. But humans of this century, where we're on the cusp of or perhaps beyond the point of climate change being irreversible, and we just don't care.
Right.
On a global scale, we do not care. We are just going ahead with it because it doesn't matter. People need to get made rich, and if you can do that, obviously maybe the 10C aren't concerned with the upper class remaining rich or whatever. Maybe they are, I don't know. But at the same time, it's there to draw that connection. And I feel like Discovery would make it too obvious, as in they would say things like, well, that's just like humans in the 21st century cutting down the rainforests or not getting rid of petroleum quickly enough or stuff like that. And
right.
Picard's going to probably cover a lot of that as well when they travel back to the 21st century. I can't believe
that's for sure.
This place is.
Yeah, that's for sure true. You know, you can definitely tell like it's not an accident that Picard is going back to a time where fascism is on the rise, as is air pollution.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think thematically there's a lot of potential for good Star Trek storytelling, and you know, you could make it complex. You know, they're mining a specific resource. What if this incredibly advanced species has, despite all of their advanced technology, you know, not figured out a way to sustain their civilization without this particular resource? They absolutely need it. And where does that leave us when you have this incredible power who has this insatiable need for a resource that all of these other sentient creatures, you know, cannot possibly resist their taking?
Yeah, and also the fact is you do have to reason with them, you do have to convince them to stop, because even if you destroy that power source, it might take them a while to build another one, but they will build another one probably, and then just go back to it once they regroup a bit. If they don't have a ton in a warehouse somewhere that they can just dredge out, it could be mass-produced power source thing, or maybe they've got DMAs in every other galaxy just scooping up the boronite. We don't know. We don't have any information, but the assumption that there is only one power source and once we deal with that the problem is solved is, well, it's short-sighted, and that's why the diplomacy option is option one, because it's not going to work.
That's why
Tarka's to destroy anything.
Yeah, that's why Tarka's plan, so to speak, at this point just has, to me, lost all of cohesion, because when the target was the DMA and the power source was at the DMA, like, okay, that's great. I get why you crossed book in that situation, because you're obsessed and you're an egomaniac and you're arrogant and you think that only you have the ability or the right to solve the universe's problems and to do so, you know, to achieve your own ends. And then after that, it was like, okay, so the power source is somewhere inside this solar system sized or larger hyperfield that has been created by this incredibly advanced, like, why on earth do you think it's just a simple matter of getting inside and finding it and taking it over for your own purposes? Like, you were already incredibly wrong about this thing. Why would you be right about the next thing when you have even less information to go on?
Yeah, I'm reminded of Enterprise again with the Xindi arc, when they said, no, we have to talk to the Xindi, because if we blow up their weapon, they'll just build another one. So all that blowing it up will do is buy us time. And we don't know how much time. About a year, maybe? That's how long it took them to get the first one. But we don't know with this. Like I say, they might just have a DMA controller just in a box somewhere. They might have millions of them.
Good callback. That's definitely an analog to the situation here. We're like, no, just continuing to like break their stuff over and over again isn't going to A, be a long-term solution, but B, do anything to convince them that they're wrong about how we are a threat. So obviously the dynamic with the Xindi arc was a little bit different because there was outside manipulation involved, and you know, they were acting out towards humanity because they viewed humanity as an existential threat, whereas the dynamic is reversed here. You know, the 10C is this outside existential threat, and we can't seem to, you know, we certainly don't have to convince them that we don't mean them any harm, because we can't do them any harm. So it is going to be interesting to see how they thread this needle diplomatically. I'm glad that Rillick is there. I mean, I continue to be a big fan of this character. She's like this season, you know, to me, she's like this season's Vance, where she gets introduced. She's a little bit prickly at first. She doesn't really know what to make of Michael or how to develop a working dynamic with her. And now we've come to the end of that journey, and this character has not had a heel turn. They have not made some incredibly boneheaded decisions or had some wild character inconsistencies. It feels like she was a fully realized, complex character delivered to us in this season, and I really appreciate that the dynamic that she brings. I hope that she has some cool diplomatic stuff to do next week or two. I want to see that
Yeah, she's a good
side of her.
character.
Yeah, I really like her character, and it's fun to see this. As such a Deep Space Nine fan, like, she represents this sort of hopeful Star Trek future where she's got part Cardassian in her, part Bajoran in her, and she's just a living embodiment of how we've moved forward from that particular kind of interspecies hatred in the Star Trek world.
Yeah. It'd be nice if they did a bit more background work to give us a sense of what has changed and politically and whatever, instead of just these slight mentions. I still feel like there's a very limited outlook on what the 32nd century structure is like. Just every now and again we get introduced to something and it's, yeah, okay, whatever. It's okay, so that's happened now, that's changed now. There's still a lot we don't know. What the Klingons up to?
Yeah.
After being such a big fixture, where are they?
And it's possible that they are ramping up other Star Trek series to get some more exploration of that kind of thing, because we don't get 24 episode seasons anymore. So maybe their Starfleet Academy show will be set in 32nd century, and we'll have some Klingon students or instructors, whatever. We'll get some.
My guess is that 32nd century is your baseline timeline, with everything else being, so every new show, in effect, progressive show will be set in that time period, and then you might just jump back to different other eras for different other things.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see if they ever actually make it the Section 31 show, kind of where that appears in the timeline.
Yeah.
But yeah, they do have, they're having their Strange New Worlds in the TOS era. They're having their, Picard era, pushing forward gradually past, TNG and DS9 and Voyager, and then way far in the future, 32nd century Star Trek land, where you're going to see some more wild and weird stuff going on.
Yeah, I suppose we've got 3 shows set around about the same time as Picard, with Lower Decks and Prodigy and Picard, obviously.
Right, of course, the animated series.
That's the prevailing timeline at the moment.
I wasn't including the animated series just because they haven't yet seemed like as plugged in specifically to a time frame, specifically Prodigy. But yeah, Lower Decks, of course, is in that kind of a little bit before Picard era.
Yes, it'll be interesting, but I do want to see the 32nd century fleshed out in more detail.
Definitely,
and
yeah.
After 2 seasons, I feel like we should have more than we currently have.
Absolutely. I mean, it feels like we're getting a little bit of that backfilled by a show like Picard, where we got a little bit more information about the status of the Borg in the 25th century now that show is in, and why in the 32nd century maybe they're just simply not around anymore. And that question may just be answered by shows taking place in eras prior. But there is a sense that I still don't have of what the status quo is in this 32nd century. Like, we get these glimpses of, like you were saying, like there's a map of where the Federation and neighboring territories like stands. We get glimpses of these things. We get little shades of, we get references to the Klingon territory, or the whatever it is. We get these graphical in clues. We get like makeup clues. We get other costuming clues. We get other little tidbits about where things stand in the 32nd century. But yeah, you're right. We don't really feel like immersed in what does this Federation and non-Federation, but like 32nd century world look like outside of these little jaunts we take to casino planets or casino worlds, whatever. Where we've seen that before, and you can be in an interior location and tell us that it's someplace strange we haven't been before, and it doesn't really register to the audience.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully it will come.
Agreed. What did you? Any other thoughts about this episode? It's been a kind of a scattered conversation. We like it. I think individually we like a lot of the individual elements, but I think we both feel concerns that there's a lack of urgency in the action and plotting that doesn't feel in union with how little time we're told that they have left to solve this problem.
Yeah, and I liked the way they focused on Detmer and Saru during the away mission and left
Good
Burnham
point.
as a leadership role.
Yep.
That was good, because normally it would be Burnham shouldering the emotional weight of everything, or they would somehow make it all about her. And she is the one that touches the hydrocarbon, because she says, as a leader, I'm going to take this on. But it was all about Saru and Detmer's emotional reactions to what they were experiencing. So you got that insight into Detmer suffering loss at a young age, and how that's shaped her into someone who compartmentalizes her feelings, whether that be healthy or not. But that gives you an idea of why she was coming apart at the seams last season, because she just couldn't do that anymore. It just all got on top of her. So I really like that, and it works for Detmer because she's the most developed of the bridge crew that we've had so far. Everyone else is here and there. There's not too much to them, so it's a natural progression for her, and it does feed into what came before. And then you had with Adira as well, admiring Detmer, which I thought was a bit contrived, because
I don't disagree. It kind of came out of nowhere.
Why would they admire Detmer specifically when they've encountered Burnham, Stamets, Culber, everyone else who's shown great grace under pressure? So why haven't they glommed onto any of those characters and suddenly it's, oh, Detmer's so amazing, which she is, but why are you suddenly making that observation?
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that, I would maybe expect if they were going to pursue a possible romantic thread. Not that every, relationship has to have that element, but when it comes out of nowhere like that, or seems like it's coming out of nowhere like that, I'm sorry, that's just kind of where my mind goes. It's like, oh, well, like, there's a good reason why you might suddenly be interested in this other person, or find them like pretty interesting or compelling, and you can't quite put your finger on it. It's because you're attracted to them. Like,
yeah.
Like it could just be that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like there's enough of a reason. It just felt like, well, let's give Adira something to do this week, and give them a little bit more development, which I want them to have a little bit more development. I like Adira. I wasn't the biggest fan of the Adira Gray dynamic, and I hate to say that I'm happier to see the dynamic on the ship simplified since Gray left. But if Adira wants to develop a mentor-mentee relationship with one of the bridge crew, I think that's great. I just felt like it wasn't established enough, or it felt like some of those, it felt like an element of a Next Gen or Deep Space Nine or Voyager show that I would criticize, where it felt like the writer just started writing this week's episode without any concern for the fact that this character never showed any interest in this other character before this episode. Like that, that's a thing that in episodic television that wasn't as well serialized, could be a little silly at times. It would seem like, why is this character doing this out of nowhere? It seems like it's completely unmotivated or connected to anything that's come before, and I was left feeling that with this relationship.
Well, it basically is, because Adira and
right
Detmer have never interacted prior to this, to my knowledge. I can't remember any conversation they've ever had. So it does seem to come from nowhere, and it's she's always so brave, and I wonder how that is, because I'm not always that brave, or things like that. So yeah, well, she is very brave under pressure, but I don't understand why you haven't noticed that about anyone else prior to this point. And Reno does
she's been admired from afar.
Yeah. And Reno does put a kibosh on the whole romantic thing when Adira denies. It's like, no, it's not like that. I'm just really impressed. And Reno brings up the whole, you should have seen her last year when we came into the future. She was a mess, and we're all a mess. And we're all a mess sometimes. Some people are better hiding it than others. It's a very obvious yet poignant lesson about people wearing their anxiety in different ways, or dealing with it in different ways.
Yes.
And it factors into the compartmentalization thing that Detmer brings up when she's on the planet's surface. I'm not as affected by these emotional hydrocarbons because of my mind's on the job.
So I compartmentalize
the way I operate.
Shut down my feelings.
As soon as the right hydrocarbon hit her, that was it.
Yeah, and I did like that scene between Jet and Adira, and I'm very glad to have Jet back, and obviously by her thankfully surviving this episode to be taken hostage. I was a little bit worried that, like, oh no, Tarka can't take Jet from me. He can't come back from that. I'll never forgive him. But now, at least for the next episode, we're going to get more Jet Reno, I assume. So that's always a good thing in my book.
It's funny how Reno's always there the whole time.
Yeah, she's like
You see her
Barclay.
every now and
She gets
again.
name checked sometimes when she doesn't make an on-screen appearance, but that's about it.
Yeah, where is she? I don't know, around here somewhere.
Yeah, she's
in the next
somewhere.
room.
She's hanging out with Nurse Ogawa.
Yeah.
All right, so anything else about this week's episode that stood out to you or that you wanted to highlight? I'm glad you brought up the Adira and Detmer of it all. And I do like how, I realize I just asked you if you had any thoughts, and I'm about to share one of mine. I did like how this episode was another example of them highlighting a crew member, bringing them to the fore, and not just doing it so that we can kill them off or say goodbye to them. Actually building in more organic story development. Like this is kind of what we always wanted. Was we'll have the main cast go on an away mission, and they'll bring a bridge crew member with them, and we'll learn more about them. It's a dynamic that it feels like should have been a part of this show from the start, because when it's done and it's done well, like I think it is here, I really like it.
Yeah, Detmer is main character adjacent, I think, because she's had more development than
at this point. Sure.
And you mentioned last week on the podcast that Bryce, one of them, they're not going to be in the show anymore because they've got another job where they might actually get some screen time. And
that's my presumption. Yeah.
And they've left, so they've in theory left the show not to come back. But you don't notice they're gone. I think if Detmer was to leave, I would notice.
True. Yeah. If she was no longer on the bridge, her absence would be notable. Same with OO. And that's about it.
Yeah. You've got the new guy, Lieutenant Christopher, who gets name checked sometimes, but he's about as flat and bland as the others. He's the replacement for whoever it is that's left, I think.
Yeah, I'm all for the bridge crew becoming less anonymous and interchangeable.
Yeah, I mean, it's a conceit. I keep saying this in my reviews. It's a conceit you have to accept. It's the Superman glasses problem. If you can't accept that Superman hides his identity by wearing glasses, then you can't watch the show because it's just going to annoy you too much. And I feel like that's something we as fans of Discovery have to just accept, that the bridge crew probably aren't going to get enough coverage. But the fact is, in the Superman example, they don't often beat you over the head by how ridiculous it is, whereas in this, they'll sometimes have a conversation with a member of the bridge crew that suggests that they have this long storied friendship that has existed for a long time that you've just never seen any evidence of. So if they are just standing there to say, Shield's at 80%, Captain, then fine. But if they are trying to tell us that this person has a history that is important to everyone around them, then I'm not buying it because I haven't seen it.
It's interesting that it's a dynamic that somehow Lower Decks manages to achieve more successfully and naturally from an early state. Like, you have this show where the main characters are not members of the bridge crew by design, and yet you do not feel like, man, I really wish we were getting more bridge crew in that show. You know what I mean? Like, you get enough of them. It feels like what you get of them is generally speaking always the right amount. And I get that it's a half-hour comedy show versus an hour-long drama. I get that we're talking about two different things, but it does feel like maybe that was what they were hoping would happen when they first conceptualized this show, where you're following characters who are not maybe regular members of the bridge, or they're not always on the bridge, and you're getting a taste of bridge crew here and there. But for some reason in this show, it's always felt unsatisfying, that the approach they take, or at least the specific way they went about that approach, because it works on Lower Decks in a way that it just doesn't here, even though in theory you have much more screen time to devote to developing them and making them more compelling. Yeah,
and Discovery clearly wears its interest on its sleeve in terms of who the interesting characters are. And I do appreciate the moving away from the paradigm of you've got the captain, you've got the first officer, you've got the helmsman, you've got the ops officer, you've got the tactical officer. They've moved away from our main characters are in these slots, whereas they're a bit more abstract in this. So we've got a couple of engineers, 3 engineers actually, because you've got Stamets, Reno sometimes, and Adira there in the same workspace. You've got 2 captains with Saru and Burnham, and then the rest of them...
Everyone on the bridge is the commander, apparently.
Yeah, it's a very top-heavy command structure, it seems.
It is extraordinarily top-heavy. Like all the best organizations in the world, there are a lot of CEOs, a lot of presidents. there's a lot of authority on this ship right now.
Yeah.
It's full of delegates from every planet in the Federation, not every planet, but a bunch of planets in the Federation. It's got the president of the Federation. It's got not one but two captains, and everyone on the goddamn bridge is the commander for some reason.
Yeah,
so,
pretty much. Yeah. Or lieutenant commander.
Very top heavy. Yeah, it's a pretty. But even then, like, sure, you might know that they're a lieutenant commander technically, but everyone's talking to one another. They have to address one another as freaking commander.
Yeah. And then there's no sense of the fact that their responsibilities have changed because Detmer's been doing the same job since she was she an ensign when we first saw her?
Who knows what rank is what, because Nielsen gets the con. What rank is she? I don't know.
Yeah, crazy. And
it's a little nuts. We say all of this with love, but yeah, it's one of those things that this show has never nailed.
Yeah.
Or never wanted to. Like that's, I think, the other thing that I think we as fans have to keep flagging. Like, there are just certain things that they have made the conscious choice that they are going to deprioritize.
Yeah. Although sometimes they pretend that they've already done it, because you get that, oh, I can't believe you're leaving, it won't be the same without you. Like, no, it probably will.
Yeah, actually. And then it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same without them. In fact, you might even like the person they replace them with better.
Yeah, who knows? But yeah, it's the Superman glasses problem. It's not something we should get too hung up on, because it stops us watching the show. But it does frustrate me when they act like they've already done it.
It's just part of the fabric of the show.
Yeah, that's where the frustration comes from for me. If they were just sitting in the background being ignored, I wouldn't think twice about it. It's the fact that they keep trying to tell me these people are well developed and important when they're just not.
Yeah, agreed. All right. Any other final thoughts you want to share about this week's episode?
No, not really. Just hopefully next week we'll actually get to see Species 10C, because it's been long enough.
Me too, and hopefully not in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I have a bad feeling about that, though. As soon as I said it out loud, I was like, oh, son of a bitch, it's going to be in the last 5 minutes.
They spend the whole episode trying to breach the hyperfield, and then they finally get in the last 5 minutes.
God damn it, you're right. That's exactly what's going to happen. God damn it.
Let's hope not.
I'm already frustrated in advance. Oh my god.
Let's hope not.
I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll get a season 5 that's like season 3 of Enterprise, where they just spend an entire season inside this weird hyperfield and get to know the giant monsters better. I don't know.
Yeah, that might be cool if they can sustain it. Otherwise, it might be the problem.
If they can sustain it. But I suspect we're headed for another end of season, hit the reset button.
Yeah.
As we have kind of the last few.
We've spent 3 episodes trying to say hello. We've finally said hello. So now we'll go on to something else. We spent 5 episodes trying to get them to notice us. They didn't even notice we were here.
Right.
And meanwhile, there's some random drama going on the ship that you don't really care about.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that does it for my thoughts as well. We both like this episode. We're both worried about the pacing.
Yes.
Fair enough. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this episode of We Are Starfleet, a Star Trek podcast on the We Made This podcast network. As I mentioned at the top, we are also going to be covering Strange New Worlds coming this May. It'll feature familiar voices. You'll hear maybe some new voices. All of them will be strange, and we're really excited for Strange New Worlds.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you want to support us financially, you can head over to patreon.com/WeMadeThis. It really helps us out. If you can also support us by dropping a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your podcatcher of choice is. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at StarfleetPod for updates and show releases, chat tracker. Just tell us what you'd like to hear on the show. Thanks again, everyone. Stay tuned to hear more about what's coming up on the We Made This network.
Elsewhere on We Made This.
Academy Watch, a prestige film podcast.
A lot of these other characters that are not human have these bizarre names, non-Anglo names, and then we have Paul.
I mean, I kind of wanted a Brian or a Gary to rock up next to him as well.
Yeah, like a Gary, like a real Scouse guy from.
I was about to do a Scouse accent, but then I thought better of it.
Yeah, let's leave the Scouse. We've already offended the Pauls. Let's leave the Garys alone.
Pick a disc.
Everyone was sort of caught up in the cowboyness of the post 9/11 world. Like to an extent, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, George W. Bush basically took on the role of John Wayne. He was like, I'm going to find them and I'm going to catch them and I'm going to put them to justice, that sort of thing. And I think for a long while that had kind of been accepted, and that was, okay, you can lead us forward, you know what you're doing. And then, some other things began happening and other wheels started turning, and that's where I think this album managed to land. Was there were a load of people that were thinking about, is this right? Should we be doing this? And it kind of validated that school of thought, because it said it in such an eloquent way, and it's very, very pointed at its administrations and its message of anti-war, not necessarily anti-this war, but anti-all wars.
Right in the childhood.
There's other boy bands include the likes of McFly. McFly was a big one.
I remember McFly.
McFly, Busted.
McFly was shit busted.
Oh, that's a controversial.
I could name 5 or 8. Well, 3 or 4.
Here we go, because I'm a big Busted and McFly.
I could name 3 or 4 Busted songs. I could name you no McFly songs.
Name me some Busted.
Year 3000.
Yeah.
Shit me, I'm sure I know more than Year 3000.
Glad I crashed the wedding.
Yeah, that one.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.